The Hartman Show, Episode 22, Tribute to Mark Morrison.
Mark Morrison passed away last week,
said Steve Hartman, his tone low, reverent.
And though the world knew him as the brilliant founder of Fulchron Sciences, I knew him as something else, a man who could see the future and still joke about running late to meet it.
There was a short pause, just enough to let the words settle, before Hartman continued.
We were lucky to have him on this show once. What you're about to hear is that conversation. A few days before he passed, these are the moments that stayed with me.
The tone shifted, a soft crackle, then clear audio.
Welcome to the 22nd episode of The Hartman Show. My guest today is one of the most influential and most innovative minds on the planet, the founder and CEO of Fulchron Sciences. Please welcome Mr. Mark Morrison.
Thanks for having me, Steve,
came Mark's reply, dry, calm, but with a hint of mischief underneath.
And let me just say for the record, we've been trying for months to get you on.
Haha. If it wasn't for my lungs trying to stage a revolution, I might have shown up early just to argue with you about fusion policy.
Let's start with the obvious, Mark. The markets are jittery. The world's reeling again. You've got full-stack automation rolling out faster than regulators can spell it, investor confidence plummeting, entire job sectors evaporating overnight. And now this latest round of systems that don't just think, they adapt. People are scared, Morrison. They're saying we might have gone too far, too fast. What do you say to that?
Morrison chuckled softly as he replied.
Steve, I wouldn't be that worried. Look, we couldn't stop the force of innovation even if we wanted to. It's like trying to hold back a tide with your hands. Every generation thinks its disruption is the final one, but it never is,
Hartman replied back.
Still, there's fear. Real fear.
Sure, but fear is a blunt instrument. I'll tell you a funny story. When I turned 50, my father's words started circling back to me. He was a stubborn bastard, optimistic in the weirdest sense. Used to say that circumstances can only hurt a man up to a certain point. After that, it starts getting better for him. I thought it was nonsense at the time, so flashback 50 years. I asked him if he was worried AI might take his job, and he said, "Son, I don't care if AI takes my job away. I'm looking forward to the day it takes my wife away."
The host cracked up. The audience split. Some laughed, some winced, and a few muttered at the bad taste. Morrison clocked the room's reaction.
"Yeah, the missus told me not to use that one. Guess I should have listened."
Hartman leaned in, trying to console him.
That wasn't too bad. Trust me, we've heard worse in that chair.
Morrison smirked, picking it back up.
Anyways, the real irony? He was a chemical engineer, not a software guy, so AI didn't exactly roll out the red carpet for him. Ended up stuck with my mom for another 20 years until he finally poofed. But the point is, you can't put the brakes on progress. Technologies don't ask for permission. They arrive, they disrupt, and they integrate. Every generation has its panic moment. Railroads, electricity, the internet, AI, and now, I guess, neural sync autonomy. Same story, new packaging. It's easy to fear what we don't fully understand, especially when it threatens our routine or our relevance. But history keeps proving one thing. We adapt. What felt like the end of an era is usually the start of a better one. So no, I'm not worried. I see opportunity where others see collapse. The real challenge isn't stopping change. It's building the emotional and institutional muscle to keep up with it.
Steve nodded slowly, then leaned forward.
Maybe. But Mark, most people aren't afraid of change. They're afraid of losing everything when it hits. It's not the tech that scares them. It's the fear of something they cannot understand. And that brings me to this.
He paused for a beat.
Velthrite. 20 years on. People still whisper about it like a ghost story. Some say it was the worst financial collapse since the mortgage crisis and the pandemic fallout. The market tanked, and no one could make sense of it. You were right in the middle of it. If there's anyone who can explain what the hell actually happened, it's you.
Rip. Morrison adjusted himself, a slight discomfort visible.
20 years ago, a team of researchers uncovered a mineral buried deep in the Cercovian permafrost, something they believed had arrived with the meteorites. Carbon negative, stable under immense pressure. At first, we thought we'd found the next thermal insulator, but it was more than that.
Morrison spoke with memory. Hartman didn't interrupt his flow.
Velthrite doesn't just resist combustion, it nullifies it, absorbs thermal energy at the quantum level, and disperses it across its lattice like a capacitor. No flare-ups, no ignition. That alone made it invaluable. Everything from aerospace shielding to power grid fail-safes. But then the lab tests started revealing more. Naturally, the applications seemed endless. Fire suppression, thermal shielding, storage insulation. We embedded it into transport containers, high-risk fuel tanks, engine casings, even data centers, to keep critical systems from cooking under stress. Civil aviation regulators began pushing for mandatory integration. Velthrite was the next asbestos, except safer and 10 times more effective. It had piezoelectric qualities and could generate microcurrents under mechanical stress. It filtered electromagnetic radiation, buffered against electrical surges, and even showed limited ion absorption in high-energy plasma environments, cross-industry gold mine, defense, energy storage, deep-sea rigs, satellites, medical nanoframes, a single mineral that made everything safer, cooler, quieter, more stable.
No embellishment, no pitch modulation, just facts that refused to soften over time. He talked like a man who had already lived through the apology.
At the time, Fulchron was still in its infancy, but it had acquired land in Cercovia, won the contract for processing Velthrite, secured the extraction rights. That's where our first major operations and our first real profits began. But that's the thing about innovation. Every miracle has a margin of error. Velthrite's anti-combustion properties work too well. Nobody asked what would happen when trace particles mixed with hydrocarbons. And then it did, during transport, during storage, during refining. Engines stalled, entire fleets, airlines, cargo, public transit, grounded overnight. Fuel supply chains collapsed. You couldn't move goods, people, or anything. And when movement stopped, so did trade. The economy didn't just dip, it cratered. One mineral, one oversight, that was enough. So no, people don't fear progress. They fear being blindsided by it, burned by the fallout, and they have every reason to.
Hartman leaned in slightly, voice calm.
Final question, Mark. What's next for you? And for Fulchron?
Morrison didn't answer right away. He stared at the table for a beat, then looked up with the kind of clarity that doesn't come rehearsed.
I learned, and this comes from years, in life, if you want success, either be purposeful or be grateful. Everything else will kill you. That's it. That's the only way I've seen people carry the weight of what they build. Purpose gives you direction. Gratitude gives you perspective. Without at least one of them, success eats you alive. With both, you don't just succeed, you sustain.
He sat back, breath slow, gaze steady. Then, with a shift in tone, he continued.
As for Fulchron, we're not chasing scale anymore. We're chasing symmetry between risk and resilience, between invention and application. Velthrite was just the beginning. What's coming next? Thermal lattice relays, zero disruption grids, piezoelectric frameworks that adapt under stress. Materials that don't just resist failure, they learn from it.
That sounds ambitious.
It is. But that's what innovation should be. Not loud, not reckless, just relentless. Measured. Quietly revolutionary. And Fulchron's ready for that. I'm ready for that.
Then that's a future worth watching.
Morrison didn't smile, but he didn't need to. As the cameras powered down and the lights cooled, Steve Hartman turned to face the lens one last time.
That was Mark Morrison, the founding father of Fulchron Sciences, a revered researcher and a compassionate human. He didn't seek recognition, but he left behind a legacy far greater than titles or accolades. Whatever you do in life, be purposeful or be grateful. That's the only way success ever becomes sustainable. Those were his last words. He meant it. You could see it in the way he built Fulchron, not just as a company, but as a vessel for ideas that might outlive him. From stabilizing next-gen energy grids to reimagining material science, Morrison didn't just innovate. He redefined what responsible innovation could look like. His work touched satellites, cities, and surgical tools, but it also touched people. And that's something no obituary, no plaque, no closing bell can ever fully capture. Mark Morrison is gone, but his vision, that balance between progress and humility, remains. For The Hartman Show, I'm Steve Hartman.